Okay, so Parshas Vayeira. It's incumbent upon us to whenever we come to Parshas Vayeira to revisit one of the most fundamental, monumental episodes in the entire Torah. It is a foundational moment for our people, for our legacy, for what we as Jews aspire to, which is the act that Avram did when he was commanded by God to take his beloved son Isaac and take him, bind him as a sacrifice. Hakedas Yitzchak, one of the hallmarks of the entire Torah. So the pasuk tells us the following: "V'yachar dver ma'ele, ve'Elohim nisa es Avram." That God gave a test. He tested Avram. Vayomer alav, and he said to him, Avram, Vayomer hineni, and he said, "Yes, I'm here. I'm ready to serve you." So the general, most conventional form of exactly what the nisayon was, exactly what this test was that Avram was given, usually is explained in the way that I always understood it, is that Avram was being challenged by God as to whether or not he was a person that could display Mesiras Nefesh, could display a sense of true sacrifice before God. Not just the fact that he would sacrifice himself, but even his son. I mean, that is just, above and beyond. That is, really the litmus test of what is a real tzaddik, something we're striving for, to leave that, to reach that level of commitment. So the test was, as you read through the episode, it seems like it's a test in whether or not Avram was a person who had that level of commitment towards God, was able to be Moser Nefesh, sacrifice himself or even his son before God. But Rav Ruderman points out, Rav Ruderman, the Rosh Shiva of Ner Yisrael, he passed away in the 70s. Rav Ruderman points out, though, a difficult question, kind of like, asking, well, why is it that God really needed to test Avram in this way, as if God didn't know that Avram was a person that was committed to him in this kind of a way, that Avram was a person that did have Mesiras Nefesh, that did sacrifice himself before God. And in fact, the very first test that God challenges Avram with is one of Mesiras Nefesh, and that's exactly what the Torah tells us. That Rashi points out right in the beginning of right as soon as we're introduced to Avram, we're told that Avram commits himself to God in this kind of way through Mesiras Nefesh. Rashi points out the story that Umedrash Agada Amar Sha'al Yedei Aviv Mei Shekibel Terach es Avram, that Terach took Avram. Terach was Avram's father, and Avram, at the age of 3 years old, he found God, recognized that all of his father's idols were all fake, and this is not there's no truth here. So what did Avram do? He took an axe, or he took a big hammer, and he went and he started destroying all of the idols in his father's idol shop. And Terach was very upset at his son Avram for destroying all of his idols. So he takes Avram beno lifnei Nimrod, and he takes him before the evil king Nimrod, al shechites es tzlamav, because he destroyed his idols. V'hishlichu lekivshon ha'esh. So what does Nimrod do? He takes Avram and he throws him inside of the fire. So we already see the fact that Avram was so committed to God that he would even be willing to go inside of a fire. This is a story we teach children in school, that Avram had so much faith in God that he went inside the fire, that he knew that God would protect him because he knew that he was standing up for God's good name and he would never. So God already knew this about Avram. Why did he have to test him with the Akedah in this way? And furthermore, when you look further on in the Akedah, you find something striking. The Akedah continues, and it says that after Avram was tested and he brought up Yitzchak up onto the mountain, that it says Vayikach es atze ha'ola, that Avram took the fuel he needed, v'yasem es al Yitzchak beno, he put it on top of Isaac, vayikach biyado es ha'esh v'es ha'me'achelet, and he took the fire and he took all of the fuel, vayilchu shneim yachtav, they both went together. And then the pasuk continues and it says that vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo ha'elokim, that they arrived at the place that Avram was going to sacrifice Isaac. Vayiven sham Avram es hamizbeach, he sets up the altar, ve'aroches ha'atzim, he sets up all of the fuel, and he binds Isaac as a sacrifice. Vayishlach Avram es yado, vayikach es ha'ma'achelet lishchot es beno, and he picks up his sickle in order to slay his son. Vayikra alav malach Hashem min hashamayim, and just as Avram is about to lay down the knife, an angel from heaven screams out and says, Vayomer Avram, Avram Vayomer Hineni. He says, Abraham, Abraham, stop. Vayomer al tishlach yadecha el anar, v'al ta'aslo me'oma. Don't touch the kid, ki ati yadati, because now I know, ki yireh Elokim ata, that God now takes over the conversation. He says that don't touch the kid because I know that you are a God-fearing person. So now, the result of the Akedah is one that God comes to the recognition that Avram is a God-fearing person. What does one have to do the other? If we're suggesting that the purpose of the Akedah must not have been to recognize that that Avram was a someone with Mesiras Nefesh, and rather it was for something else, so you also have to ask, well then, what was it about the Akedah that came to the result of Avram getting this accolade from God of being a Yirei Hashem? So these are the two questions we're asking. Number one, what was the true test of the Akedah? And number two, what did Avram accomplish through the Akedah that God was able to in turn say, now I know that you're a God-fearing person? So let's go back to the beginning of the episode of the Akedah once more. After God tells him to that we learned that God calls upon Avram to test him. Vayomer, he says, Kachna es bincha, es yechidcha, asher ahavta es Yitzchak. That I'd like for you to take your son, es bincha, es yechidcha, your only one, asher ahavta, the one that you love, es Yitzchak. Why did God have to describe to Avram who to take in 4 different ways? If God wanted to be direct, so he should have said Yitzchak. If he felt that Avram was unclear as to who he'd be referring to by simply saying es bincha, your son, so then he should have told him straight away Yitzchak. If God knew that Avram would not know 100% with 100% clarity who Yechidcha is, your only one, so he should have said Yitzchak. If he didn't know what ahavta meant, if God would have thought that Avram wouldn't know what ahavta meant, your beloved one, then he should have said es Yitzchak. What's with all of these ways of formulating or describing Isaac that God is saying to Avram? So Rashi tells us right over here. Rashi says es bincha. Amar lo shnei banim yeshli. When as soon as God said es bincha, Avram said, well, I don't know who you're referring to because I have 2 sons. Don't forget, Avram also had Yishmael with Hagar. Amar lo, so then God said es yechidcha. Okay, fine, take your only one. So Avram responds and says, Amar lo, ze yachid li'imo v'ze yachid li'imo. I have 2 sons. They're both yechidcha. They're both single children. They're both only children to each of their mothers. So I still don't know who you're referring to. Amar lo asher ahavta. Okay, so take the one that you love. So Avram says, Amar lo shneim ani ohev. I love both of them. I love Yitzchak. I love Yishmael. It was a very, very difficult thing for as the Torah describes in this week's Parsha, it's extremely difficult for Avram to decide to send Yishmael and Hagar out of the house. It was an extremely, extremely difficult thing for him. In fact, both on the list of Rashi and the Rambam, they both list, and Rabbeinu Yonah, both list that as one of the tests of Avram to send away Yishmael from the home. It was a very difficult thing. He loved Yishmael. He still loves Yishmael, and he loves Yitzchak. So again, God says, "Es bincha, take your son, take your yechidcha, take your only one, take your ahavta, take the one you love." Avram says, "Well, I have two of each." So who are you referring to? So then comes along Hashem and he says, "Amar lo, es Yitzchak." Fine, take Isaac. Meaning, this is who I'm referencing. I'm referencing Isaac when I say all this. So what's the purpose of all this? Ask Rashi, "V'lama lo gila lo mitchila." Why didn't God just straight away tell Avram who to take? Take Yitzchak. Says Rashi, "Shalo la'arbobo pitom v'chazus da'ato alav v'titarif." So says Rashi, first of all, because it would have been too much for Avram to handle. Had God said right away, "Take Isaac," that would have been too much for him to handle. Too much. Furthermore, Rashi says, "Ukedei lechavev alav es hamitzvah," in order to make this commandment that God was giving to him, meaning the commandment of taking Isaac as a sacrifice of Akedas Yitzchak, in order to make the commandment one that's more beloved, liten lo schar al kol dibor v'dibor. He added on additional language in order to give Avram more merit. What does that mean? Simply because of the fact that God is using more descriptive ways to tell Avram who he's taking, therefore it's going to give Avram more merit? Explains Rav Ruderman, that's exactly right. Why? Because when Avram heard all of the descriptions of Yitzchak, Kachna es bincha, this is my son. Kachna es yechidcha, this is my only son to my wife Sarah. Kachna es ahavta, the one that you love. I love Yitzchak. Es Yitzchak. The more that God built it up, the more difficult it was for him to finally do it. God wanted to see that despite all of the love that he had for Yitzchak, ultimately Avram's true love was that between him and God. We, as you know, those that are zoche to be parents, and even those that are children and know from their relationship with their parents, the love that a parent has for a child is something that is unquantifiable. It is incredible. I mean, it's the funniest thing, right? When you show someone a picture of your child because like they smiled in like a funny way, and you show them a picture of it, and you're kind of like expecting them to react in like the same way that you reacted to it. It's like, "Oh my gosh, do you see this amazing picture of my kid picking their nose?" Right? And to me, it's like the greatest picture in the world, but to them, it's like, why the heck would you show me that? Like, I don't want to see that. It's a kid picking their nose. Like, why would I want to see that? But as a parent, it's the most incredible thing in the world, and it's the picture screams not just 1,000 words, 1,000,000 words, and your whole heart is shown through that picture of the kid picking their nose. And for Avram Avinu, one could have only imagined what it was like for him to take Isaac as a sacrifice. This is my bincha. This is my yechidcha. This is my ahavta. This is my everything. This is my world. This is Yitzchak. And yet, despite all of that, he still went to go and bring Isaac as a sacrifice, because ultimately his main mission in life was to serve God. Says the Mizrahi the following. The Mizrahi is a commentary on Rashi. He's an early commentator. The Mizrahi lived in the 14th century, and the Mizrahi was really one of the first. It was a fundamental work because it opened up Rashi. Whereas, let's say, like the Ramban or other commentators that you'll find in the Mikros Gedolos, what they'll do is sometimes they'll quote Rashi and give a different explanation than Rashi. What the Mizrahi did was that he was the first one to show why we need to focus our energy in just understanding Rashi's words. And that's exactly what he did, what he does over here. Look at the words of the Mizrahi. The Mizrahi writes the following. He says, Kachna es Yitzchak, aval hutzach lomar es bincha es yechidcha asher hafta va'achar kach es Yitzchak, kedei levavev es beno be'enav bechol osan hata'arim. God wanted to every time he used another description about Isaac to remind Avram just how much he loves Isaac. Shel chiba lakach lo. Schar al kol dibur v'dibur. On each and every word that Avram used, it was another level of merit that Avram received, because it was another piece of Isaac that he was putting on that altar. Shel terei achibub ki riboy achivuvim. That the more it was described of how much Avram really loved Isaac, kachahu tsaro bizvichaso ulafum tsara agra. Therefore, it developed more anxiety it had potential to develop more anxiety for the Akedah, and therefore he would have received more reward. So therefore, says Rav Ruderman, when you see this Rashi, you get a very different perspective as to what the challenge of the Akedah was. It wasn't just simply self-sacrifice. That he already proved to Avram, to God many, many times. Avram, it was obvious that he was someone who had Mesiras Nefesh. But what was the challenge of the Akedah? What was it that Hashem wanted to see from the Akedah? That Avram was a person that truly loved God. He wasn't just subservient, but he was subservient with a smile. It was his life. It was his everything. It was just the same way that a parent experienced the love of a child. Avram showed God that he was even more than that. And it's similar to like the story of when Yaakov Avinu was reunited with Yosef after 22 years of being separated, and Yaakov thought that Yosef was murdered, and finally they're reunited, and Yosef falls on Yaakov's shoulders and he begins to cry. And what does Yaakov Avinu do? So he begins to say the Shema. Rashi tells us. Why is he saying the Shema at that moment? So explains the Stipler, because Yaakov Avinu at that moment needed to channel the love, the immense love he was having for Yosef at that moment towards Hashem, because ultimately everything comes from God. My kid comes from God. And I have to recognize that. It's my responsibility to take care of them. I love them, but ultimately all of my energy is because God entrusted me with this responsibility. And that's what Avram wanted to see that's exactly what God wanted to see from Avram. Rav Ruderman points out, he says, now this is exactly why Avram is referred to as a Yury Shamayim, because Yury Shamayim is often mistranslated as fear of heaven. As we pointed out before, that this is exactly the accolade that Avram was given by God after passing this test, this great test of the Akedah, that Avram is referred to by God as the pasuk says, "Vayomer al tishlach yadcha al anar v'al taslim amar ki ata yadati," because now I know ki yirei Elokim ata. He's referred to as a quote unquote, the translation over here says God-fearing person. So usually Yury Shamayim is translated in that way, but Yury Shamayim is a lot more than God-fearing. Yury Shamayim is really the ability to experience God. It's Yiras HaRomamus. It's an all-encompassing life that one lives, that they recognize everything that they have in their own personal lives, everything that their community has, everything that their family has, everything that their country has, everything that the world has, everything that the universe has, is all being directed straight from God. And Avram at this moment, after hearing that I am not just bringing up some person, but I'm bringing up as bincha, my son, as yechidcha, my only one, as asher ha'afta, the one that I love, Yitzchak, this person, that's what I'm bringing up towards Hashem. I'm following God's command, even if it means I'm going to lose this. That kind of ahava that Avram was showing towards God is how God knew that at that moment he was a Yury Shamayim. He was a person that experienced God in every single aspect of their lives. And it's exactly what David HaMelech says, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem, that that in order to have wisdom in life, it begins with Yury Shamayim. What is Yury Shamayim? It's not a fear, but how is a person supposed to gain wisdom if they're stuck in place because they're scared? Rather, Chachma, wisdom, is going to come from the fact that you are experiencing life through the prism of this is from God. This is the model of the Akedah. This is what when we read this Akedah, and when we read the story of the Akedah, which the Shulchan Aruch says a person should try and do on a daily basis, not just once a year when we come to Parshas Vayeira, or on Rosh Hashanah, but rather we should try and review this episode of the Akedah every single day. That when we review the episode of the Akedah, we recognize that this isn't simply a lesson in self-sacrifice. This isn't a lesson in commitment. This is a lesson in perspective, life perspective, the perspective of thank you, Hashem, for everything I have. And I sincerely love you, Hashem, the same way that I have an unconditional love to the people that I love in my life, my parents, my spouse, my children. That type of unconditional love is the unconditional love I have with God, if not potentially even greater than that, like Avram Avinu displayed. And that's exactly what we all have to be striving for. Wish everyone a beautiful Shabbos. Let me unshare my screen over here just so I can say good Shabbos to everyone.